This session, I'm going to look at the interesting technique of time boxing, time boxes, why we use them, how we use them, and their purpose. But quite simply, a time box is literally that. It's putting a time frame around the work I need to do. Now, interestingly enough, we can look at stages and increments in projects as time boxes, which they technically are. But again, the concept is not so much around that, it's making sure we do control the time frame properly. This is very important. There's no point in saying, well, we've got 3 weeks, but we end up taking 3.5 weeks. This does not work. And we'll look at how that has an impact on projects anyway. But the key purpose of a time box is really to control iterative development, to control the iterative development technique, because that's what we're using to evolve the requirement, the product, right? The feature that we're building, to control iterative development. Remember, we've got this cycle going on, looping through until we finish the completely build. And the point is that, why is it like that? Because most of the time we can only estimate how long it's going to take, simply because we don't know what changes the business might want in it, or how the particular product, the feature will build as we go through that particular cycle of building it, right? So we need to have some idea of controlling how long we spend on it. And that means we've got to build a certain amount within a certain time frame, right? And if you've had a chance to look at this session we did on the old iron triangle, if you look at the 6 parameters, the things we have to control through projects, of course, time and costs are the 2 critical ones, followed by quality. Right? Because the time is of the essence. Time in projects is more of the essence than anything else, because quite often I've got to meet a certain deadline. And of course, often if we go over time, it actually impacts on the cost too. Now, as we said, you can impact on the cost without going over time by adding resources. And that has an impact on the investment of the project. But quite often if it's time critical, then that's where we really need to watch out what's going. And down at the build end, this is where we need to control, so we don't go building on and on and on. And the golden triangle situation, we turn that around because now we can use contingency in a different way, or a different form of contingency, I should say, really. And we'll see that in a moment. But the first purpose of time boxing is to control the development of the solution, control iterative development, because we're estimating, we don't know how long it's going to take. Some may take longer, but at the end of the day, we have to shut it down at some point in time. Right. So let's have a look at what a time box might look like. Literally, in a diagram form, it looks just like this. A time box. Right. Now, a time box is the generic name for it. You know, in a Scrum, it's called a sprint. From a GSM's perspective, in Agile PM, for example, Agile PM from GSM, they call them solution development time boxes, is its full term, solution development time box, which is rather a mouthful actually, obviously. So we stick to the word time box. But in its general term, it is a generic term called a time box. And it is that, it's just locking the time frame from here to here, right? Now, if you've had a look at the session I did on the Scrum, you may remember that actually what happens is in a sprint, we fit the requirements to the time box. So the time boxes in the sprints, right, to sprint, are all the same length. The sprints are all the same length. That just controls how much we can put into each sprint, which is fair enough because that's the way they want to work. From a production point of view, a production type environment is not so critical. In a project, we have the opposite situation. In a project, we need to fit the time box. So we fit the time box around the requirements, because now I want to build a set of requirements that are related to each other. And that can often come out when you do product-based planning and you look at the flow diagram. It gives you an idea of that group of requirements. I need that because at the end of the day, that's what I want to have, that time box. That's something I want to release, deploy as something at the end. This is bolting the project together in pieces as well, which is a bit like doing it here. We're bolting the requirement together in pieces as we build it, or we're bolting the project together in pieces as we go through the project's life cycle, through the delivery plan, as you like. But the main difference here, in a project, we fit the time box around the requirements. That means I'm going to spend in the time I need to build the requirements. Yes, it's still estimated, but that's the point. You know, we're estimating, but we don't want the time box to go over, because what we're looking to do, obviously, if we have a delivery plan looking like this is my delivery plan. The purpose is to make sure that the project ends when we said it would, at the end of the project. And of course, they're split up into time sequences, time frames, whatever you want to call it, increments, project increments, stages, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we're splitting the project up into segments. And we do this for a number of reasons, but we'll look at that in more detail. But what we'll do is we fit, most of the time, we're fitting our time boxes to fit around the requirements I need to build in that particular time frame, and then I'll build them around. So that's why they're all different lengths. Remember, time boxes can overlap each other, different teams building different parts of the solution as you build it. But the idea, of course, at the end of a particular time frame, I want to release something that's a subset of the overall solution. For example, when we were looking to upgrade the bank teller system a few years ago, we wanted to look at all the applications that were considered gold band. These were the prime applications that the bank wanted to have priority on the network. So we tested those first to make sure we could configure them and the network to talk to each other. Tested them on the network and then put them into another pilot. In the meantime, we followed up with the silver group and then the bronze group and made sure they all worked independently. And that's what we were doing, releasing those to make sure they all worked independently and then bolting them all together to make sure they all played ball on the same network. That's usually a big test as well. Great when they work on their own, but we want to make sure they worked on the prioritization afterwards. So again, that was releases of subsets of the solution as we went through the project, as much as we do the build itself. And each time allows us to operate any change or incorporate any change that we need to have, feedback from the business, feedback from the solution going out there. Right. So from a project point of view, we need to fit the time boxes around the requirements, and that's why the increments, or these time frames, are at different lengths, because they represent the overall time needed to deliver those particular requirements within it. But as you can see, if each of these time boxes works and we're stuck to the time we've agreed at the beginning that we're going to deliver the requirements in there, then obviously each segment will end up on time, and therefore the whole project will complete on time. And this is part of the concept behind time boxing, right? Now, we'll look at some other area a bit later on regarding incorporating other approaches like work packages, which could be in here. That's the one in purple, right? A work package, right? But you can see the increment still controlling the overall time frame. And that's quite important to note that, but we'll look at that in another session. Right? So time boxes. Control iterative development. Now, there are lots of different ways of running these, but obviously any particular iterative development process you put in place, there's an element of planning. So at some point, we need to have the first part of the time box checking objectives, and the requirements that we need to deliver for those objectives, requirements, and any risks that are involved in there. So this is the first thing. We look at the objective of the time box. Then at some point during here, we need to plan, evolve, and then review, right? Whatever, I'm just putting generic term names down. If you're using the DSTM version of conversation, thought, and action, or the PDCA version, or whatever particular iterative process you follow. Some are quite convoluted, actually, if you look on the internet. At the end of the day, that's what you're doing during the main part of the time box, right? So you either do that in groups of requirements. I might do groups of requirements in here, and then another group here, and another group here. I might do all the planning up front, and then evolve them all, and then review at the end as well. But really, the whole point is that we do that during the main part of the time box, right? And then at the end of it, we close it down to make sure what we've completed, complete time box, right? Shut it down, done, not done, retrospectives, right? Retrospectives, and these are quite important, retrospectives from a point of view of lessons learnt. Lessons learnt. Because at the beginning of the time box, That will be fed in here too, because sometimes we may need to adjust the estimations of the work we've got for the time box. The time box does not change its length, but it might change what we can do within it. If we've overestimated, that means we might be able to do more work. If we've underestimated previously, then it might mean we can do less work within the time box, but we don't change it. So the principle of the time box is control iterative development to make sure we can get done what we need to do primarily for the objective of that particular time box, along with other time boxes within an increment to make sure we've got something we can deploy at the end. But the overall principle is it controls the whole delivery plan and make sure we end up on time. Right. Now obviously we need to have a look at something in there related to this, and that's called contingency. So I'm going to write that up here, contingency, because we can't change time. We don't want to change the time. Theoretically, we shouldn't change the cost right now, but we'll explore that in another session. The contingency has to be something else, and that becomes the coulds, right, or the ones we don't desperately need within the time box. So those requirements that don't have any, they have value, but they don't impact on the fit for purpose of the solution, we can move those out if necessary into another time box or another increment, or even out of the whole project to make sure we end up on time, and therefore any extra time we may need for a particular requirement or more within the same time box, we can get that back by removing requirements that we don't need for that particular solution for that time box or that increment, right? So that's the other useful area here, and that's why that diagram, when we shift around using scope as an understanding, because now we can look at it from a priority point of view from the project, and also gives us an indication of what we can use as contingency within the time box and the increment and even the whole project to ensure that we deliver the solution on time. This is really quite critical, time boxing it. But we'll have a look at how that works in more detail when we look at delivery plans and how we can orchestrate our time boxes from here onwards.